Zephaniah chapter 2, verse 11. The Lord will be awesome to them, for he will reduce to nothing all the goods of the earth. People shall worship him, each one from his place, indeed, all the shores of the nations.
Welcome back, my dear brothers and sisters, at the second virtual SEC CAMP meeting. In the past year or so, we had to adjust ourselves to this new reality brought about and around by this pandemic. This is why, by displaying this resilient attitude, we understood that even a pandemic, as terrifying as could be, cannot and must not crush our spirit and disconnect us from each other and God. We all know that the very key ingredient for any given CAMP meeting was always the fellowship of brothers and sisters. This is why, in spite of the inherent difficulties of traveling up to Prestatyn, or being cramped in those smelly chalets, or enduring the sea wind and the drops of those ever-present kingfishers, most of us would take time off and spend a vacation over there. Yes, the programs were good and useful, sermons timely and surgically executed, the music inspired. However, above all, the most cherished experience was that of meeting our brothers and sisters from the SEC territory and being able to share with them in the same spot, in that spiritual tent made of time and space, our deep conviction and hope that we believe in the same Christ Jesus the Lord, who promised that he will be back again, and we will still reporting for duty. My name is Pastor Sorin Petrof, and I would like to bring you greetings from Harrow, Halsden, Sudbury, Seven Kings, and Watford, members of my district. First of all, I really hope that even in the current circumstances, confined within the limits of the social distancing, which apparently it might be soon over if everything goes well, you are safe and sound, eager to return as soon as possible to a full experience on site at your local churches. Secondly, I would like to thank Paul Lee for his gracious invitation to preach for this devotional for this year, Making Disciples, Building Communities theme. The good news is that with the help of technology, we can still experience an interaction, although a virtual one, connected together even from the comfort of our homes. Now, even if we are physically distant, spiritually we are not. Maybe this is a new sense of what it means to be in the spirit, though not physically present. Paul was always saying that, especially when he wrote his letters, regretting that he cannot be present with them. However, in spirit, he was with them. I do hope that in spite of these physical limitations, our virtual and spiritual interaction would be meaningful and relevant for all of us. Lastly, let me greet all with a traditional Romanian Adventist greeting, Pacea Domnului, which means God's peace be with you. That was the introduction. Now let us dive into our topic for today's devotional, which I would like to introduce it by an old Jewish tale as it was recorded by Martin Buber. Now, who was Martin Buber? Martin Buber was a 20th century Austrian Jewish philosopher. At the heart of his theology was his theory of dialogue, the idea that what matters is not understanding God in abstract intellectual terms, but rather entering into a relationship with Him. Such a relation, he believed, is possible only when we establish genuine relationship with one another. Curiously, his writings were more appreciated by the Christians than the Jewish people. In one of his books, Tales of the Hasidim, originally published in 1933, which is a collection of Jewish tales based on stories both written and spoken, Martin Buber conveys a very interesting meaning. It is a story about a certain rabbi called Rabbi Shimsha Bunim of Peshisha, who used to tell many tales to his students. Who was Rabbi Bunim? He was one of the key leaders of Hasidic Judaism in 18th century Poland. In his teaching classes, Rabbi Bunim used to voice a certain tale, apparently his favorite one. Now, the story goes like this. Once upon a time, in a not quite very distant place, lived a certain rabbi. Not much is known about him except his name, Isaac, the son of Yekel, and that he was very poor, like 80% of the world today who live on less than 21 pounds per day, or 2/3 live on less than 7 pounds per day, and every 10th person lives on less than £1.35 per day. Now, that was a time when universal credit, house benefit, council tax support, child benefit, income support, pension credit, and the rest of 25 more available benefits in the UK were a fairy tale, did not exist. Everyone was on his or her own, like many in this world. However, even after many years of intense destitution, this poverty did not shake Rabbi's faith in God. One night, to this rabbi from Krakow, the old capital city of Poland, was told in a dream to live and search for a treasure in Prague. In those days was a major European city in the region of Bohemia. Now is the capital city of the Czech Republic. It was the same city where the well-known 15th century Protestant reformer Jan Hus preached salvation through Christ and eventually was tried for heresy and burned at the stake in Constance in 1415. But Prague was a big city even in those times. However, the whereabouts of that treasure was indicated in the dream as located under the bridge that led to the royal palace. Possibly the well-known Charles Bridge? Maybe. We don't know and it doesn't matter. What did matter, though, was that the dream, the same dream, was repeated the following night and the night after. And you know, when a dream is repeated, it must be something serious. It was only after the third time when, finally, Rabbi Isaac decided to leave for Prague. Now, even for our modern standards and comforts, it was a very long and tiresome journey, about 322 miles, like the distance from London up in the middle of the Lake District, except no car, no train, no bike, no Uber, possibly a horse, and maybe a cart. Finally, he arrived, but the bridge was guarded day and night, so the rabbi did not dare to start digging. However, he would come every morning near the bridge and wandering around until evening, daily. One day, the captain of the guards, intrigued by what he detected as a strange behavior, asked the rabbi politely what he was doing there. Was he looking for something or waiting for someone? Rabbi Isaac was quite straightforward and honest in his answer. He told the captain about a dream that had driven him to come so far. Upon hearing this, the captain burst out laughing and said, "Oh, poor soul, look at you, tired and pale. Even your souls are blunted. You went on such a long trip for the sake of a dream." Well, that happens when you believe in dreams. Once I was told in a dream too to go to Krakow and search in the house of a certain Jew called Isaac, the son of Yekel, and find the treasure apparently buried behind his stove. Can you believe this? Isaac, the son of Yekel. Sometimes I can even picture myself in that place where probably half of the residents are called Isaac and the other half Yekel, searching around through all the houses and looking for a treasure. Isn't that hilarious? And the captain burst out laughing again. Upon hearing this, Rabbi Isaac gratefully bowed, then making haste to return home. Immediately, he started to dig up the treasure. It was exactly what the captain mentioned when he was told in dream, behind the rabbi's stove. The treasure was real, but it was nowhere to be found in Prague, but in Krakow. No under the bridge leading to the palace, but under the rabbi's stove in his humble house. After he dug up the treasure, with part of it, he built a prayer house. A prayer house called Reb Isaac Reb Yekel School. That was the story. Now, this tale was the most cherished story of Rabbi Bunim. You may remember the 18th century Poland rabbi mentioned by Martin Buber in his book. And he always told it to all of his new students. It was more like an induction day presentation of what to expect from the curriculum of his rabbinic school. And always after he would have finished the tale, Rabbi Bunim used to say to these students, like a conclusion in form of a challenge, remember this story and receive its teaching, that there is something that is nowhere to be found in the world, not even near the right and holy, but there is still a place where it can be found. I hope that you grasped the gist of the story. It's a simple and a fascinating one. However, typically to all Jewish tales, the driving force of the tale is in a paradoxical element, that there is something that is nowhere to be found in the world, but there is still a place where it can be found. What does it even mean? At the most illustrative level, the rabbinic narrative could be easily outlined as follows. Number one, often what you are looking for is at hand, in your world, your house, your heart. That would be the stove in the rabbi's house. Second, to find that, you must take a long detour to come back to yourself from afar, to walk a distance, and that would be the distance from Krakow to Prague in the story. Sometimes it's better to be naive than skeptic or doubtful. The rabbi believed the dream. Fourth, to take the dream seriously, you don't need to abandon your discernment, meaning that he was eager to obey the instruction, but there was nothing fanciful in them. Fifth, when you find it, don't keep the treasure just for yourself. Share it, which the rabbi did, building a house of prayer. Sixth, the solution is around, but to find it, you might need the salutary intervention of a stranger. That would be the captain of the guards. And the seventh, the last one, when the opportunity comes, do not hesitate. Grab it immediately. It could be once in a lifetime. The captain did not believe. He was not to be convinced. Nevertheless, after hearing this tale, we feel that it wouldn't be the end of the world to allegorize the story a little bit, to find associations and correspondences with something or someone more familiar to us. And it's very tempting to contemplate the tale that way. Like, who represents the rabbi? What is the treasure? Is a dream reliable? Who that stranger might be? What that distance stands for? Why he wasn't told in the first place that the treasure was in his home? And so on. Although I am phrasing these things as questions, they are not. They are more than that, and something different. First, the story is not a parable per se, as in the biblical tradition, mostly like Jesus' parables. It's a Hasidic tale. Now, Hasidic Jews are a group of very traditional and conservative believers within the Orthodox Judaism. That means that is a fictional tale, but nonetheless a useful illustration that usually operates with powerful existential elements. Essentially, at its core, the Hasidic story is about a quest, and it's not a common quest. It is something that would change your whole life. A challenge to begin searching for something. Search for what precisely? There must be something specific, not generic, something possessing an aura of a treasure. And as with every treasure, hard to find, almost improbable, but worthy of time and effort. Might not necessarily be a material treasure, although it wouldn't kill us. But there are many treasures in this world that we aspire for and find and keep. Could be a profession, the very profession that we dreamed of ever since we were kids. That profession that we are working hard to keep it. Or gaining a stable family, a happy family, a family that in these days seems so hard to keep it together. What about material possessions? Why not? We say that the money doesn't bring the happiness, only a specific amount of it. But we also know that the quantity of happiness does not increase proportional with the quantity of monies. However, the truth is that the happiness is not conditioned by that. It never was and never will be. Still, it seems that eludes us, especially in these days. On the other hand, as believers, maybe we are digging for some spiritual values, trying to get a grip of them. Even the moral perfection that would be considered as the ultimate treasure that is really worth pursuing for. We were not told to be perfect as our Father in heaven is perfect. Maybe that's the only treasure left for us on this earth. For others, though, the treasure might be a special person that still waits to become visible, to be acknowledged as a precious individual, not like a commodity or an object. And even if we are unaware, there are many undiscovered gems around us ready to come to light. What do you say about a social or a righteous cause? There are so many today, but which one is the one? That one worth going to great lengths, navigating through storms and obstacles, making personal sacrifices, knowing that one day maybe the history will speak nice of you. Or the dream to dedicate yourself to philanthropy, though it seems nowadays that only the billionaires can afford this virtue. But what they call philanthropy is in reality a glorified tax exemption and nothing more. Doesn't matter how well it's dressed up. For some people, the ultimate dream is not driving a fancy supercar or purchasing a mansion or a trip to an exotic destination or dining in a Michelin-rated restaurant or becoming the CEO of a Fortune Top 100 company. It's just simply plain survival. That's their only dream, to survive another day, another conflict, another pandemic, another meal, another illness. Because at the end of the day, the only dream that we are left with is to live, the life itself. We thus trying to get a firm grip on it, trying to live as long and, if possible, as good as possible. Maybe that's the ultimate dream, the rest being just life bonuses that need to be pursued but not always achievable. Or as Jesus put it, seek first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, and all these things will be added to you. Matthew 6 verse 33. But now it's time to switch the focus from the individual, from ourselves, to the collective, to the church. Where are we now as a church? A church that embarked herself on the mission of proclaiming the present truth to the whole world, and nothing short of preparing the way for the second coming. But we, and here I hope that we are aware of the faithful and true witness assessment in Revelation 3 in his message to Laodicea. We are perceived as poor and wretched, exactly as the rabbi from the tale, or as Jesus surgically was describing the last church of Revelation. However, we are not the ones, the Advent people, that had the dream, the vision. Are we not the chosen ones, despite our shortcomings? And are we not destined for great things in this world and the world to come? Sounds comforting, yes, but maybe it's just an echo chamber sound, hearing precisely what we are uttering. Let's have a genuine conversation here. Here's my challenge. Did we find the treasure yet? And how do we know we found it? Now, before answering that, allow me to digress a bit from the main metaphor, the treasure hunting. In order to evaluate better our present quest as a church, we need a better understanding of our current predicament, especially as the people who profess to be the guardians of the present truth and the final events. Let us start with 19th century America, the birthplace of our movement, and that particular context in which we came to accept the Adventist light. A bizarre but cheerfully anthem was circulating in that time, trumpeting with confidence that we are dwelling in a grand and awful time, in an age of age telling, to be living is sublime. Indeed, it seemed sublime to live in that America, having every reason to be optimistic. The long-awaited millennium was knocking at the door. The 1,000 years of peace and prosperity were about to be ushered through social reforms, political mechanism, national progress, and personal development. The new millennial package included universal peace and justice, collective salvation, and land devoid of the original curse, health, and healing. In a word, a capitalist golden age. America would be more than it was, and great again. Suddenly, without warning, the crisis hit through the so-called 1837 panic, which defrauded Americans of every bit of optimism. And even if they would still flirt with any vague hope of the advertised millennium, it was finally shattered by none other than Mr. William Miller, a Baptist preacher in Pittsfield, Massachusetts. Against this backdrop, the reluctant pioneer of the Advent movement came up with the radical message. The long-awaited golden age was a naive but nonetheless a dangerous utopia. The world would not last very long. Actually, it will enter its final lockdown on 22nd October 1844. Miller prophetically foretold the end of the world at a time when many were waiting for the beginning of the millennium. One historian of American religions remarked, "No wonder it took a long time for Americans to forget William Miller." The end did not come in 1844. It couldn't come. We now reflect in retrospect, and yet an end did come. The end of a seductive illusion, the end of the myth of progress, the belief that humans have the capacity through technological development and political will to radically transform the world into an imaginary Commonwealth paradise. Unfortunately, the confirmation came. The Civil War, 1861, 1865. The most traumatic event in American history. Even today, it still plagues the consciousness of Americans of the whole political spectrum. Then those two devastating world wars of the 20th century. And the rest is history. A sad, brutal, unfortunate history, but not the denomination that was born in 1844 from the so-called Great Disappointment. A new spirit was awakened. A religious movement was born that recycled the end-time theme as raw material for modeling a particular philosophy of history, an apocalyptic vision of the future. Adventism was born into an end-time paradigm and always professed that the end of the history is the reason why the church exists as a denominational necessity. I do not intend to draw forced and decontextualized similarities. When it comes to history, I prefer the paradox inspired by Solomon and Heraclitus. There is nothing new under the sun, and yet Nothing is the same because everything changes. Still, a question arises. If we are heading to the end, how should we advance? What would be the answer? Jeremiads undoubtedly have their places in our preaching, and not a few are rushing for them. Even the call to repentance and the perpetual urge for revival and reform suddenly become relevant. But except for recalling the ancient plagues and Psalm 91, the most quoted psalm of the crisis, conspiracy theories and veiled accusation that we are hiding behind Zoom meetings, what are we left with? How do we manage now an almost dissolved distinction between the seventh day and the rest of the days? How to live in a continuous state of rest at home, a kind of never-ending sabbatical? And when it comes to working from home, is there still a meaningful difference between the public and private life? If the church no longer has access to its walls, nor to the physical congregation between her members, or being able to organize regular religious activities, does it have any legitimacy as a digital entity? How to solve the tension between the natural and healthy impulse to isolate and the sincere desire not to cave in, but to find alternative way to be useful to others without the danger of infection? Building communities, right? Who would have predicted the day would come when an ordinary virus would paralyze an entire world, suddenly forcing us to stop, literally, and to radically redefining familiar concepts like relationships, work, transport, food, economy, tourism, culture, religion, hospitality, that we will enter against our will into a new strange reality. A reality where the line between paranoia and the balanced sense of actuality will become increasingly blurred and vague. A reality where the state of lockdown will condition our behavior for a long time from now on. A reality where we shall socially distance ourselves not only from the world, which we have always pretended to, but even from the church and its religious activities, those temporal and spatial stopgaps that somehow maintain the illusion that through weekly participation we are still the chosen ones. Is the church ready to deal with an end that always was preached with religious devotion, but paradoxically postponed by a secular pragmatism? Adventism response to the 2020 crisis is supposed to be deeper than articulating some creative methods of religiously survive in lockdown, and beyond the assurance that after this it will be business as usual. No, it won't be. Church life will no longer be the same because we will no longer be the same. What would be our message then? Stay, pray, and pray? Yes, it's imperative to protect ourselves physically and spiritually in a very necessary form of social distancing. However, in a major crisis like this, the greatest need of the world is that of a leadership. Exactly what the religious or secular prophets always did, indicating direction, clarity, and assurance in history's darkest times. Maybe we should prophesy again, but what should we prophesy in this current setting? Sunday laws and natural treatments? 100 days of prayer, health and temperance, leaving the big cities? The truth is that during the 175 years of denominational history, we have missed some significant moments, moments when we should have been leading those who preach the end with passion and courage. Maybe not the end of the time or the world, but the end of some dreadful realities. For example, the end of the slavery, the end of the oppression of Victorian workers, the end of the violence against women, the end of exploitation of children, the end of the racial and ethnic discrimination, the end of the abuses of totalitarian governments, the wild capitalism and social inequity, the end of the systematic destruction of the environment, and so on. Back then, we should have been at the vanguard preaching those social ends in order to qualify now to proclaim the temporal end. We can speculate as much as we want about what sort of end we are dealing with. Maybe it's one of the many that have interacted with our history, an end that radically changes the direction of the society. Ironically, in this sense, the end is behaving like a virus, always mutating to successfully attach to its host. However, rarely did we manage to recognize these mutations. Or maybe we are dealing with the one we have been waiting for, the last one, for which we are never ready because it's so different than we have expected. If we keep quiet, Christ warned us, the stones will cry out. But apparently only stones shouted and protested against the sinister realities of our society, while we were silent and socially distancing ourselves from them. It is not really the work of a prophet to raise her voice against the evils of society, to direct the public in the right direction, even if history is not kind to those who do not prophesy well. But like Jonah, we went silent while waiting for a particular end that did not come. Honestly, even in the most fanciful scenarios, the church couldn't foresee the current crisis. There was no room in our prophetic timetable or scenarios for China's menacing and globalizing presence, the rise of the social networks, the standardization of the public discourse, the algorithmization of the everyday life, the social distancing, the deterioration of America's influence in the world, the flickering aura of the papacy, the proliferation of the social protest, the climate change, the dominion of the multinationals, and now, on top of that, a full-fledged pandemic. It seems that we are entering a new era, a post-pandemic, coronavirus world. Yes, we are now starting to be optimistic, albeit reluctantly. The society seems to be on the path of recovery. However, we know that the world wouldn't be the same. As Seventh-day Adventists, we always advertise ourselves as the true guardians of the prophecy and the final events. We thought we knew what was about to happen and ready to proclaim it. Only that in the past 175 years, rarely we were able to anticipate anything that matches the reality. What are we supposed to preach and do in times like this? What is our distinctive message? What is the core of Adventism now? I'm not referring to the London-based one-week preaching program, a good opportunity for reclaiming our denominational theological roots. What I mean is our perpetual quest to unveil and proclaim the present truth, or to dig up the genuine treasure. Now, this is the current predicament, and against this backdrop, we are supposed to make sense of the challenge, to follow the dream and go and find the treasure. And now, going back to our initial story about the treasure that was hidden in that poor rabbi's house, let us explore another story, a biblical parable about a particular quest, the challenge to find the most precious thing in the world, as Jesus put it. Matthew 13, verse 44, the parable of the hidden treasure. The kingdom of heaven is like treasure hidden in a field, which a man found and covered up. Then in his joy he goes and sells all that he has and buys that field. Jesus enough hope that you could find the treasure, with a big if. Some are prepared to buy the field without finding the treasure first. This is when we are saying we have the truth, like we own it. But do we? I don't know. In this case, it is more like an idea, a shadow, a form without really possessing it. I mean the truth with capital T. There's another problem here. We are not really searching for the truth simply because we believe that we already have it. It's just a matter of interpretation, not identification. The treasure is all ours and ours only. Well, that's a bold and seductive idea, but we need to pay a price if we are to entertain this thought. The collateral damage being an inhibited factor which prevents us from keeping digging for the treasure. We may have the map, but is not the same as possessing the field or the territory. However, it should be around in our Adventist perimeter. We were led to this field by the early dreams and visions. We know it's here, but the kingdom of God isn't quite obvious, neither at the surface. We need to explore it, to investigate it. We are not supposed to dig for a random thing, but for a particular reality. However, few are still digging. To what extent are we willing to enter into this existential quest? You may remember that it took the rabbi a long journey, 322 miles, the distance from Krakow to Prague, only to find nothing to dig around that bridge. And no one wants to invest time and resources in vain. Still, this is a biblical truth. In order to find something, you need to experience nothing. It sounds crazy, I know, but there you have it. But let us remember the book of Genesis, the biblical report of the beginning. Before life, it was void. Before light, darkness. Before something, it was nothing. Applying this principle in the spiritual realm, that was the terrifying perspective Nicodemus was presented with. Jesus laid out just one option. You need to start again, Nicodemus. You must die before coming alive. There is no other way around. Christ said that only if the grain dies, it bears fruit. John 12:24. With the shocking conclusion in verse 25, he who loves his life will lose it. What can we do then? Well, the easiest option would be acclimatization. Well, it's just another crisis. We'll get over it, changing a little here, little there, just to remain the same. That means identifying digital, logistical, communicational resources to prevent the translation of social distance into a religious and denominational alienation. On the other hand, the hard option would be the transformation. That involves a complete restart of the religious, social, even the organizational experience. That would pose a serious challenge to our present condition. But Jesus said that the new wine cannot be poured into the old wineskin. Both would be damaged. Now we can renew it because we have time and nowhere to go, except to the only one who is the way, the truth, and the life. Let us remember the first story. Often, what you are looking for is at hand in your world, your house, your heart. That would be the stove in the rabbi's house. To find that, you must take a long detour to come back to yourself from afar, to walk a distance, and that would be the distance from Krakow to Prague. Sometimes it's better to be naive than skeptic or doubtful. The rabbi believed the dream. To take the dreams seriously, you don't need to abandon your discernment, meaning that he was eager to obey the instruction, but there was nothing fanciful in those instructions. When you find it, the treasure, don't keep it just for yourself. Share it, which the rabbi did, building a house of prayer. The solution is around, but to find it, you may need the salutary intervention of a stranger. That would be the captain of the guards. When the opportunity comes, do not hesitate. Grab it immediately. It could be once in a lifetime. The captain did not believe it. He was not to be convinced. Now the second story. The treasure is not at the surface. It is buried deep in the field. First task is to find the treasure and then buy the field, in that particular order. You may find the treasure, but you cannot own it if you are not buying the field. Or you may buy the field with enough hope that you could find it, which is very unlikely, almost impossible. However, this purchase will cost you everything. Some are prepared to buy the field without finding the treasure first, and that's a great mistake. If we are to apply the gist of the Hasidic tale and the message of the parable of the hidden treasure, the conclusion is very clear-cut. The treasure is not far from us. Apostle Paul looks like the captain from the story, the salutary intervention of a stranger who can lead and point us into the right direction. He said, "Do not say in your heart, who will ascend into heaven?" That is to bring Christ down. Or, who will descend into the abyss? That is to bring Christ up from the dead. But what does it say? The word is near you, in your mouth, in your heart. That is the word of faith that we proclaim. Because if you confess with your mouth that Jesus is the Lord and believe in your heart that God raised him from the dead, you will be saved. Romans 10:6-9. The treasure, the pearl of great value, is Christ himself. He is the ultimate treasure. He is the way, the truth, and the life. It is my sincere prayer that we are up to the task, follow the vision, and start digging again, both in our personal and denominational perimeter, to retrieve the treasure. Then we'll stop acting as spectators and start becoming disciples. How do we know we found the treasure? The biblical answer is very clear on that. Only after we have sold everything else. That's the only way. Only then we can prophesy again, and the world will know that there is a prophet around. Only then our message will get through and the truth will shine. And only then we will be ready for the end, whatever that end might be. May God grant us precisely what we need most, which is His treasure. Amen.